Hey everyone, how's it going? Today we have a very special episode themed after diversified portfolio. And you know what that term means? It means it's time for some Pokemon Showdown. Hey. Okay, I gave you ample warning for this, okay? On April the 1st, I told you that there will be more Pokemon videos to come, and I'm not gonna let you down on that. So yes, today I'll be showing off what we did. I basically faced off against Maxey in a 7 game series. We'll feature 2 of these games today. And yes, I'm actually serious about this. There's not going to be any Android Netrunner content in this video. If aside from from this one diversified portfolio here. If you want more Netrunner content, you've got to wait for tomorrow's video where I present the cache refresh survey results. For now, let's hop into the team analysis for the team that we'll be using in this 7 game series. This is the Sun and Moon VGC 2017 format, so a lot of the Pokemon you see here are very familiar if you have been following the VGC scene at all. It's basically the meta Pokemon. We have Tapu Koko, offensive with Life Orb. We have Sash Katana, which is so you have 2 very speedy attackers here. You have Arcanine, the best fire type in the game with Intimidate and with the standard 50% berry. You have Garchomp. This one has the Groundium Z, the only Z move I have on the entire team. Pretty standard attack moves with Poison Jab to deal with the Tapus. We have Porygon 2 with Eviolite, much more defensive compared to the rest of the team. And finally, we have Tapu Lele with Choice Scarf. So this one's actually the most glass cannon Pokemon of the entire team. So let's get down into the 2 games and we'll see how things go from there. Alright, so this is the 4th game in our 7 game series, so we kind of know each other's teams already. Although we are still trying to switch up strategies here and there. So one thing I realized is that you can't really go wrong with the Tapu Koko Arcanine lead. It's a very solid lead. It's like Temujin turn 1. It is that good. You have Arcanine to cover any physical attackers on your opponent's end, and you have Tapu Koko, which almost certainly gives you the speed advantage. You want to have your Pokemon be the first one that gets to make a move on turn 1, and there's a good chance you get that. And my opponent Maxey realizes this as well. So yeah, we both need mirror leads in the Tapu Koko Arcanine. So from the past games, what I learned is that Tapu Koko is a huge threat to my team, both because it's so speedy and because it has amazing damage output. Arcanine is also quite a big offensive threat and something that I need to get rid of from the board because I do have the Kartana at the back, which is heavily threatened by Arcanine, both due to the Intimidate and the fire type attacks. So I'm thinking here, I need to really put the hurt in one of these. So I ended up going for the Thunderbolt into the Tapu Koko and ended up taking a double attack. The Z move plus the Dazzling Gleam knocks out my Tapu Koko. So at least I forced the Z move on my opponent, but I soon realized I don't actually have a Z move of my own. So we are kind of equal, but I'm 1 Pokemon down. So this is not good. And given that my Arcanine protected, my opponent knows that they can safely attack into my Arcanine slot. So this is actually quite dangerous. The good news is I've reset the terrain with Tapu Lele out. So I knew that, as mentioned earlier, Tapu Koko was the biggest threat on the field. I needed to get rid of it regardless, and I knew Arcanine probably didn't have enough damage output to do that, nor did it have the speed. So what I needed to do was to use my Choice Scarf Lele to focus down the Koko, remove it from the field before it can actually do any damage, and that's exactly what happens. Unfortunately, this means I do take a Flare Blitz from the Arcanine. My opponent knows that the Tapus are the biggest threats to my opponent, so they are focusing all the energy on the Tapus, and it's working really well. Now my opponent sends in Nihilego here, and this is a really bad matchup for my Arcanine. But again, I can't really switch on to Kartana because the Arcanine is threatening that spot. So what I instead decide to do is to get rid of the Arcanine from the field so that my Kartana can come in safely. And this means that I want to helping hand the Tapu Lele so my Arcanine actually gets to do something before it dies. At least I thought it would die. I thought my opponent would use Nihilego to power gem the Arcanine slot, but turns out he played Trick Room and got the Gigalith in for free. Oh my gosh, I got so baited into killing the Arcanine there. I really, really wanted to kill the Arcanine to get the safe Kartana switch in, but now this is really bad for me. My opponent set up Trick Room, and both my opponent's Pokemon are slower than my three Pokemon that are remaining. So even though I'm at a Pokemon lead, my opponent has the speed control for the rest of the game, so I'm in a lot of trouble. My opponent gets to go first, and they knock out my Lele, who cannot defend itself due to not having, being choice locked. You can't protect. So I am forced to get the Kartana in here. It's 2v2, but my opponent has the speed advantage. So yeah, at this point I realize that Kartana is my win condition here because Kartana is an auto win against Nihilego. So this is why I'm using Helping Hand on Kartana, because that boosts my Kartana's damage output, and Arcanine cannot really do much damage to the rock types anyway. So I do a Sacred Sword into Gigalith, taking it down to less than 10% HP. So at this point, I'm looking at Gigalith. I can finish it off with an Extreme Speed. The problem with using any other move on Arcanine right now is that Arcanine is too slow because of Trick Room to actually get Flare Blitz before it gets KO'd by an Earthquake or a Rock type move. The problem with Extreme Speed is that there's Psychic Terrain up, so Extreme Speed cannot work. But it only has one turn left, so my turn here is actually to protect both Kartana and Arcanine. The double protect stalls out the Psychic Terrain so that I can use Extreme Speed on Gigalith the next turn, and hopefully this leaves me in a 1v1 versus Nihilego, which is an auto win for Kartana. So here comes the double protect, and I scout out my opponent's move. They heavy slam into Kartana and power jam into Kartana. So obviously my opponent knows that Kartana is the bigger threat here. Arcanine is a walkover for them. So alright, I have to pick my move against Nihilego. Sacred Sword seems obvious, but Smart Strike actually deals more damage because it benefits from same type attack bonus, stab move. And that's pretty simple. So I Smart Strike to Nihilego here, and I go for the Extreme Speed against Gigalith. If all goes well, and if I don't get KO'd by the Nihilego, I should win. But the Extreme Speed misses the range, 4 to 11%. It did not KO the Gigalith, and my Kartana got focused down with Power Gem. It goes down, and that's basically GG. Arcanine cannot win against double rock type in this scenario. So yeah, the only thing remaining to do is to just play out the rest of the game. Obviously I'm going to go for the Extreme Speed again to Gigalith. Actually any move, it didn't have to be Extreme Speed, but it didn't matter. I need to remove one of the Pokemon from the field ASAP. When you're 1 against 2, the biggest priority is to remove one Pokemon from the field, level it to a 1v1. My opponent goes for Trick Room here, which is really curious, but it doesn't matter either way. None of my moves will actually do anything to this Nihilego before a Power Gem kills me, so I'm just gonna protect here. Power Gem comes in, and then I finally go for the Flare Blitz and get KO'd. Interestingly enough, my Arcanine was actually faster in Trick Room than the Nihilego. That Nihilego is actually high speed, turns out. But it doesn't matter, my opponent takes this game, so yeah. Mistakes were made. Yes, the big turn was when I got baited into killing the Arcanine. I was so intent on getting rid of the Arcanine because it was such a huge threat to my Kartana, but I shouldn't have worried about it that much because my Kartana was scarfed anyway. Focus sashed anyway. Instead, I allowed my opponent to get the Trick Room off, which I didn't see coming. We played a couple of games before this, but this is the first time my opponent revealed the Trick Room on Nihilego, so that was a very sneaky move, and I basically set my opponent up to sweep the rest of the game with Nihilego and Gigalith. So that was awful, but hey, you live and learn, and we'll now go to the second match. This is our final match, the 7th of 7 in the series, and we'll see how that one goes. Now, since we know both each other's teams at this point, having played so many games, we are trying to switch up our strategies as much as possible to, keep things fresh and to keep our opponents on our toes. So I lead here with Tapu Koko. Obviously, you lead with Tapu Koko every time. You can't go wrong with it. Because electric terrain is probably going to be set up one way or another, and since it's going to be, you want to have your Koko out for it. I then also put a Porygon 2 in. It's a very interesting choice, and we'll see how that works out. I also bring Kartana and Tapu Lele. I felt that Garchomp throughout this series has not been able to pull off any attacks whatsoever, and Arcanine is a liability against my opponent's rock types. So I'm gonna go with this lead, and my opponent needs Nahligo Tapu Koko. So learning my lesson from the Trick Room Nahligo, I realized that my opponent could pull a bait and switch here. I knew my opponent's Tapu Koko runs Volt Switch. So a very obvious move here would be to Volt Switch into Gigalith. You see me mouse hovering over it there. And then Trick Rooming with Nahligo, and I need to stop it. So my plan here is to taunt the Nahligo, and then use Porygon to do something. So there's not much I can do here. I don't want to set up Trick Room for my opponent, so I basically have to play Toxic, but you can't use Toxic on Nahligo because it's a poison type, so I'm just gonna Ice Beam the Tapu Koko slot. And yeah, my opponent does indeed pull off the Volt Switch. Hopefully they'll switch into something that takes super effective damage from Ice Beam. And it turns out my opponent was swearing in chat that the Trick Room was nullified. So yes, they do swap in the Arcanine, which is not ideal for me, but I do get the freeze on the Arcanine, even though it didn't do that much damage. And obviously my opponent's Nihiligo's Trick Room was fizzled. So this puts me in a very good position. Initially I thought of Thunderbolting the Arcanine because, as usual, I find it a big threat against my Kartana, but thinking about it a bit more, if you have a frozen opponent, why are you in a hurry to kill it? A frozen opponent is not going to do anything, so I should be actually focusing into the other slot instead. So I took back my move. I originally wanted to Thunderbolt the Arcanine, but given that the Nahligo might set up Trick Room again later, I think it's better to get rid of it right now. So I switched my Thunderbolt target to Nahligo, and because Porygon 2 is on 64% health, I figured it might be a good idea to set up my Porygon by recovering. So my opponent swapped back out to Tapu Koko, which takes 50% damage from the Thunderbolt. Arcanine remained frozen, and I get the heal off. So this is looking quite good for me. If I drop another Thunderbolt in the Tapu Koko slot, it should knock it out because it's in yellow health now. So that's basically one free Pokemon for me. The question is, what do I do with my Porygon here? I could Toxic the Arcanine, but no, you can't, because it is frozen. You can't have two status effects at once. So I didn't really have any good options here, honestly. So the next best thing I could do was to Ice Beam the Arcanine. I could position myself by swapping in another Pokemon, but there was nothing much I wanted to swap into anyway. You can't swap into Tapu Lele here because Lele resets the terrain and will prevent the knockout on Tapu Koko. So yeah, my opponent thawed out and managed to get the Z move off against my Koko, which knocks it out. So I can bring in my Tapu Lele at this point, switching the terrain and giving me a huge damage output beast in Tapu Lele. Now I know Psychic one-hit KOs Nahligo, but the bigger threat here is Arcanine. Again, Kartana in the back, you don't want Arcanine alive, so Psychic goes into Arcanine. And again, I didn't really have much to do with my Porygon, but I realized one really sneaky thing my opponent could do here is to swap out the Arcanine and use Trick Room on Nahligo. That would absolutely devastate me because that gives speed control to my opponent. So I had to gamble that my opponent was going to switch out here and use the Trick Room. If my opponent doesn't use Trick Room here, I'll be setting up Trick Room for my opponent because the Arcanine will KO and they get a free switch into Gigalith. And I know they have Gigalith in the back because my opponent attempted to Trick Room in turn 1. So yes, I did call it correctly. My opponent did do the switch and Trick Room turn. So using Trick Room in the same turn, I managed to reverse the Trick Room and maintain speed control. So this was very huge for me and gives me a significant advantage in this game. I fire a Psychic to Nihiligo here because this is a guaranteed one-hit KO, because it's a poison type. And Porygon Toxic's Gigalith, which should put it on a timer. If I can put Gigalith on a timer, I should be able to win this game. Just by stalling it out. This Gigalith is actually very tanky. It doesn't have speed, but it makes up for that in bulkiness and damage. So it's actually really hard to take it out even with the attacks that I have. And I don't really have many very good attacks. Garchomp is the one that's supposed to take out these rock types, but I don't have it on my team right now. So I Toxic the Gigalith and my opponent Heavy Slams to KO my Tapu Lele cleanly. Oof, this is not looking very good. So yeah, I mean, not looking very good for me, but I still have this pretty much under wraps. Or do I? My opponent actually still has an Arcanine. This is a 2v2. This is very, very close. My opponent having Arcanine is a big, big problem. My opponent smartly conserved the Arcanine earlier. So now, I'm forced to face off against the Arcanine with my Kartana, which is absolutely the last thing I want. I need to remove this Arcanine from the field before my Kartana goes down. So I do have a detect here. The question is, do I detect on my Katana, or do I go all out offense against the Arcanine? I realized that detecting was not going to help me here at all, because yeah, I need to find a way to kill the Arcanine, and Porygon 2 is not going to be able to provide the damage output, so I had to go offensive here. Besides, I did have the Focus Sash, so I didn't have to worry about yeah, I don't have to worry so much about getting KO'd this turn unless my opponent doubles into the Kartana. So I I use Sacred Sword there, and between Ice Beam, Sacred Sword, and the Flare Blitz recoil, my opponent takes enough damage to get knocked out as well, along with the Sandstorm damage. So that was a very huge turn for me, because if that Arcanine wasn't knocked out, ooh, my Porygon would be in a very tough spot. But yeah, doubling into the Arcanine was a huge move last turn that reduced this to a 1v1 situation, but my opponent's already on Toxic. So all I needed to do to close out this game was to Toxic Stall by recovering every single turn. My opponent will eventually take lethal damage. So that was a very close game. It required me to make the correct predictions at so many junctures in the game. I had to call the Trick Room on turn 1, I had to call the Trick Room again when the non-legal came back out, and at the end there I had to double into the Arcanine and hope that it didn't protect. So yeah, a lot of calls needed for me to get this right, and even then this was a very, very close 1v1 situation that could have easily turned my opponent's way if I made even one wrong call. That was a very close game, and shows to you how enjoyable Pokemon can be when it comes down to these very clutch reads. I hope you are enjoying my foray into Pokemon content. Let me know if there's any point of improvement I could make. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and as always, happy net... gotta catch them all. Goodbye. Really need to practice concluding my videos there.